The patriarch, Emile Durand, was found dead, his face frozen in an expression of absolute terror, without a single mark of violence. Before we dive into this story that chilled the blood of an entire region, tell me, where are you listening to this terrible tale from? Paris, Lyon, or perhaps from the Cévennes themselves? Leave a comment. And if you love stories that send shivers down your spine and reveal the darkest secrets of French history, subscribe to this channel. Because the story of the Durand family is only the beginning, and some secrets should never be unearthed. But now, it's far too late to turn back. The winter of 1898 descended upon the Cévennes with unusual ferocity. The mountains of southern France, normally gentle despite the cold, transformed into a frozen labyrinth of mist and silence. In this isolated region, where villages clung to the hillsides like eagles' nests, the Durand family had ruled for generations. Their home, a massive gray stone mansion, its walls covered in moss and ivy, stood 3 kilometers from the village of Saint-André de Valbourgny. Surrounded by centuries-old chestnut forests and reachable only by a winding, poorly maintained road, the Durand estate inspired both respect and unease among the locals. Emile Durand, the patriarch, was a 62-year-old man with a stern face and commanding manners. A prosperous timber merchant, he had built his fortune on the trade of chestnut and oak from the Cévennes, shipping his goods as far as Lyon and Marseille. But it wasn't just his wealth that impressed the villagers, it was his power. An inexplicable, almost supernatural power that seemed to guarantee the success of every one of his ventures. "My father has a gift," his eldest son Lucien, aged 38, often said, a robust man with dark hair and piercing eyes. "A gift our family has always protected." The night of January 15, 1898, was especially bitter. A snowstorm swept through the mountains, and the wind howled across the valleys. Like a wild beast. In the grand hall of the Durand estate, the fire crackled in the massive stone fireplace. The family was gathered for dinner, an unchanging ritual that took place every evening at exactly 7:00 p.m. Emile Durand presided over the table as always, his cold eyes observing each member of his family. To his right, Lucien the heir ate in silence, his jaw clenched. To his left sat Claire, his 26-year-old daughter, a pale young woman with long chestnut hair, her eyes fixed on her plate. Her husband, Théodore Marchand, a notary from Montpellier, looked visibly uneasy in the heavy atmosphere. At the far end of the table, almost lost in shadow, sat Mathilde Durand, Emile's wife, a 57-year-old woman with a gaunt face and lifeless eyes. She hadn't spoken a single word since the meal began. "Lucien," Emile said suddenly, his deep voice echoing through the silence, "tomorrow you will go to the eastern forest. It's time." Lucien lifted his eyes toward his father. A strange glimmer passed over his face, a mix of fear and resignation. "Father, the storm." "I said tomorrow." Emile cut him off sharply, his tone slicing through the air like a blade. "The pact must be honored. We cannot wait." Claire flinched at the mention of the word pact. Théodore frowned but dared not ask questions. In his 2 years of marriage to Claire, he had learned that there were topics one never discussed in the Durand family. The meal ended in an oppressive silence. At 10 o'clock, everyone retired to their rooms. The storm outside grew even fiercer, shaking the shutters and making the old stone house groan under the wind's force. At 3 in the morning, a scream tore through the night. Lucien was the first to rush out of his room, oil lamp in hand. He ran down the main staircase toward the salon. What he saw froze him in place. Emile Durand sat in his armchair near the fireplace, exactly as he did every evening after dinner, smoking his pipe and reading. But this time he was dead. His body was completely untouched, no marks, no wounds. His hands rested naturally on the armrests. His legs were crossed just as they always were. But his face was a mask of absolute terror. His eyes were wide open, staring at something above the fireplace. His mouth was twisted into a silent scream, and every line of his face was carved with an expression of unimaginable horror. "My God," Lucian whispered. Claire appeared behind him, followed by Theodora. When she saw her father, she let out a scream and collapsed into her husband's arms. Mathilda arrived last, walking slowly, almost like a sleepwalker. When she saw Emile, she showed no emotion at all. She simply stepped closer, extended her hand, and gently closed his eyes. "He knew," she said in a flat, hollow voice. "He always knew this day would come." "What are you talking about, Mother?" Lucian asked, his voice trembling. Mathilda turned to her son. There was now a strange glimmer in her eyes, something almost fanatical. "The pact has been broken," she said, "and now we are all going to pay." By dawn, as the storm began to fade, Dr. Roussel arrived from Saint-André de Valbourgny. He was a 50-year-old country physician, competent, rational, and not easily shaken. He examined Emile Durand's body carefully, jotting notes in his worn leather notebook. "This is inexplicable," he finally said, removing his glasses to wipe them. "No signs of poisoning, no wounds, no trace of heart or brain disease. His heart simply stopped." "But that expression on his face," Lucian began. "A post-mortem muscle spasm, probably," the doctor replied, though his tone betrayed his doubt. "It can happen under certain circumstances." Even he didn't believe his own words. The funeral was set for January 18. For 3 days, Emile Durand's body rested in the grand salon, lying in a massive oak coffin. Around it burned black candles, an unusual choice that made the few villagers who came to offer condolences whisper uneasily among themselves. Claire barely left her room. Whenever Theodora tried to speak to her, she pushed him away, murmuring incoherently about voices and the call of the forest. "My dear, you need to rest," he said gently on the night of January 17, sitting at the edge of their bed while she stared blankly out the window. "The shock of your father's death." "It's not the shock," she interrupted, still not looking at him. "It's what comes after. Theodora, we have to leave. Tonight we must go." "But the funeral is tomorrow," he protested. "You don't understand." She turned to him abruptly, and he was stunned by the intensity in her eyes. "My father didn't die of natural causes. He was punished for trying to break the pact. And now it's Lucian's turn, then mine." "Claire, you're exhausted, grieving." "I'm not delirious," she screamed, gripping his hands with a strength that startled him. "Listen to me. My family has guarded a secret for generations." "For generations." "A terrible secret. My father wanted to end it, but it was already too late. The pact demands its tribute. It always will." Worried, Theodora called Dr. Roussel, who prescribed a sedative to calm Claire. She eventually fell asleep, but even in her sleep, she whispered strange words in a language Theodora didn't recognize. That night, while the entire household slept, Lucian descended quietly to the salon. He approached his father's coffin and slowly opened it. Emile's face looked peaceful now. Dr. Rousel had done his best to soften the rigid features, but Lucian wasn't looking at his father's face. He was searching for something else. He slid his hand beneath the body and withdrew a small black metal box, no larger than a deck of cards. On its lid were engraved ancient symbols, markings only members of the Durand family could understand. "I'm sorry, Father," Lucian whispered, clutching the box tightly to his chest. "But the pact must continue. Our bloodline cannot die." He closed the coffin again and returned to his room, the box hidden beneath his coat. At dawn on January 18, the day of the funeral, the storm returned with renewed fury. The cemetery of Saint-André de Valborgne, perched on a hill overlooking the village, was lashed by an icy wind that whipped the bare branches of the nearby trees. About 15 villagers had gathered around the freshly dug grave, wrapped tightly in their coats and black shawls. Snow fell in slanting gusts, quickly covering the oak coffin as Abbé Fournier, a 45-year-old priest with a gaunt face and deep-set eyes, recited the customary prayers. De profundis clamaviad te Damen. Lucian stood stiff as a post at the edge of the grave, his face expressionless. Beside him, Mathilda wore the same vacant stare she had since Emile's death. Claire, supported by Theodora, was trembling violently, though not merely from the cold. Abbé Fournier paused mid-prayer. His gaze fell on Lucian, filled with a troubled intensity. He had been the Durand family's confessor for 15 years, and he knew. He knew there was something deeply unholy about this family, something that lay beyond his understanding as a priest and a man of God. 3 weeks earlier, Emile Durand had come to see him at the church in the middle of the night. It was unusual. Emile was not a man, a religious man, and he had never before sought spiritual counsel. "Father," Emile had said, his voice trembling for the first time in his life, "I must put an end to something my family has done for far too long. But I'm afraid of what will happen if I do." "What are you talking about, Emile?" asked Abbé Fournier, lighting a candle in the dimness of the church. "I can't tell you, not yet. But if something happens to me, if I die in a strange way, promise me you'll investigate. Promise me you'll uncover the truth about my family." The abbé had promised, though he didn't understand what he was agreeing to. And now, as he watched the coffin being lowered into the frozen earth, he knew that moment had come. Requiem aeternam Donai Damen. When the ceremony ended, the villagers quickly dispersed, eager to reach their homes before the storm worsened. Only one woman remained, Madame Blanchard, the old nurse who had cared for Lucian and Claire in their childhood. She approached Mathilda and whispered something into her ear. Mathilda gave a faint nod, almost imperceptible. Abbé Fournier noticed the exchange with curiosity but said nothing. Back at the Durand estate, the atmosphere was even heavier than before. The few servants still working for the family, the cook, the maid, and the stable hand, all seemed nervous and avoided eye contact with their employers. That evening at dinner, Lucian broke the silence. "I must go to the eastern forest tomorrow morning," he declared. "Father was right, it can't wait any longer." "No," Claire cried, leaping from her chair. "You can't, you know what will happen." "Claire, sit down," Mathilda ordered, her voice icy. "Lucian will do what must be done. It is his duty as the eldest." "His duty," repeated Theodora, who had finally lost patience with the family's endless secrecy. "What duty? What's going on in this house since Emile's death? You all speak in riddles." A heavy silence fell over the table. Lucian looked at his mother. Mathilde gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "Very well," Lucian said slowly. "It's time you knew Theodora. You're part of the family now." He stood up and gestured for Theodora to follow him. They descended the old stone staircase leading to the cellar, a vast, vaulted space that had once been used as a wine store. But at the far end of that cellar, hidden behind barrels of aging wine, there was a massive wooden door reinforced with iron. Lucian took a key from his pocket and opened the door. The smell that escaped, a mingling of mold and something indefinable, something organic and rotten, made Theodora step back. "What is that?" he asked, hand pressed to his mouth. "Our inheritance," Lucian answered as he stepped inside. The chamber was circular, about 5 meters across. The stone walls were covered with carved symbols, ancient marks that seemed pre-Christian, perhaps even pre-Roman. In the center of the room stood an altar of black stone, and upon that altar rested a book bound in dark leather. "In 1643, Lucian began, his voice echoing in the round space, "our ancestor Jacques Durand was a ruined man. The 30 Years' War had destroyed his business. His family was starving and he was on the brink of suicide. It was then that he met someone or something in these mountains, a being who offered him a pact, eternal prosperity for his lineage in exchange for a tribute." "What kind of tribute?" Theodora asked, though part of him did not want to hear the answer. "A sacrifice. Every 50 years, a member of the family must return to the place where the pact was sealed and offer something. My father was supposed to do it this year, but he refused. He wanted to break the pact, and you saw what happened to him." "That's madness," Theodora exclaimed. "You don't actually believe in those superstitions." Lucian turned toward him. Absolute conviction shone in his eyes, and something else as well, something that looked like terror. "I believe because I saw," he said. "When I was 16, my father took me into that forest. He showed me. And since that day I have known that our fortune, our power, everything we are, is not the fruit of work, it is the price of the pact." That night Theodora did not sleep. He lay awake in the marital bed, listening to Claire's restless breathing beside him. His rational training as a notary, his Catholic upbringing, all of it resisted belief in what Lucian had told him. And yet he could not deny the strange facts that had accumulated since Emile's death. On the morning of January 20, Lucian prepared for his journey to the eastern forest. He dressed warmly, took a leather satchel with provisions, and hid the small black metal box that Theodora had seen the night before in the secret room. "I will be back before nightfall," he told his mother and Claire, who had gathered in the entryway. "No, you will not return," Claire said, tears filling her eyes. "You will disappear like all those who tried to honor the pact in recent years. Something has changed, Lucian." "The pact doesn't work like it used to." Lucian stepped closer to sister and placed his hands on her shoulders. "I have no choice. If I don't do it, we'll all die, you mother, me, even the child you're carrying." Claire blanched. Claire blamed me, she hadn't told anyone yet. But of course Lucian knew. He always knew. At 10 a.m., Lucian left the estate. The storm had calmed, but the sky remained a menacing gray, and a thick fog clung to the trees. He took the path leading east, gradually descending into the chainier forest. Abbé Fournier, who had decided to keep watch over the Durand household, saw him go. There was something in Lucian's manner, a mixture of resignation and fear, that compelled the priest to follow him. He kept a cautious distance, hiding behind trees and rocks. Lucian walked with firm, confident steps as though he knew the way perfectly. After 2 hours of walking, they reached a part of the forest unfamiliar to the abbé, a place where the trees were older, more twisted, where daylight seemed to struggle to pierce through. Lucian stopped in a clearing. At its center stood a circle of upright stones, megaliths, probably dating back to the Celtic era. The place exuded a strange aura, a heavy unease that made the abbé shiver despite his thick coat. Lucian took the small black metal box from his satchel and opened it. The abbé was too far away to see what it contained, but he saw Lucian take something from it and place it in the center of the stone circle. Then Lucian knelt and began to recite something, words the abbé didn't understand, a guttural, ancient tongue. Suddenly the fog thickened around the clearing, forming almost a solid wall. The abbé felt a presence, something vast and ancient stirring. His instincts screamed at him to run, but he stood frozen, gripped by both fascination and horror. Lucian suddenly rose and staggered backward. He was staring at something in front of him, something the abbé couldn't see from his hiding place. The expression on Lucian's face was the same one Emile had worn in death, pure, absolute terror. "No," Lucian cried. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The pact is honored." But whatever he was addressing did not seem to agree. Lucian screamed a terrible soul-rending scream that echoed through the entire forest. Then, suddenly, silence. Abbé Fournier waited long minutes before daring to leave his hiding place. When he stepped into the clearing, Lucian was gone. Only his satchel remained, abandoned near the circle of stones. And at the very center of the circle, where Lucian had placed his offering, there was nothing left, only a dark stain on the frozen ground, as if something had been scorched there. Abbé Fournier picked up the satchel with trembling hands and fled the clearing, pursued by a terror unlike anything he had ever known. That evening, when Lucian did not return, Mathilde showed no surprise. Claire, however, completely broke down. "I knew it," she repeated again and again. "I knew it." Theodora alerted the authorities. A search party was organized, but another blizzard struck that very night, making it impossible to continue for 3 days. When the gendarmes were finally able to enter the forest, they found no trace of Lucian, no body, no footprints, not even a clue. He had simply vanished, as if swallowed by the mountain itself. In the weeks following Lucian's disappearance, the Durand estate changed entirely. The once vibrant home, filled with Emile's commanding presence and Lucian's unyielding energy, fell into a dreadful silence. The servants, terrified by recent events, all resigned, even the old cook who had served the family for over 20 years. Only Madame Blanchard, the aging nursemaid, remained. She came daily from the village to prepare meals and ensure the family lacked nothing. But Claire was the most affected. Since her brother's disappearance, she barely slept, and when she did, she awoke screaming, speaking of voices calling to her, and of something watching her from the trees. One cold February morning, Theodora woke up alone in bed. Panicked, he rushed through the house and found Claire standing before their bedroom window, staring out toward the forest. She wore only her nightdress, her bare feet on the freezing wooden floor. "Claire, you'll catch your death," he said, hurrying to wrap a shawl around her shoulders. She didn't respond, as if she hadn't heard him. "He's calling me, Theodora," she finally whispered. "Every night I see them in the forest. They want me to come. They say it's my turn now." "These are nightmares, my love," he tried to reassure her softly. "You're in shock, it's the stress." No. She turned to him abruptly, gripping his arms with surprising strength. They're not nightmares. I hear them even when I'm awake. Listen carefully. Theodora strained his ears. All he could hear was the wind through the trees and the occasional creak of the old house. But in Claire's eyes, there burned an unshakable certainty, a look that chilled him to the bone. And a terror froze his blood. "We have to leave this place," Theodora said firmly. "We're going back to Montpellier. You need rest, proper care, far away from here." "We cannot leave," came Mathilda's cold voice from the doorway. Theodora jumped. He hadn't heard her approach. Claire's mother stood there, dressed in her black morning gown, her thin face ghostly pale in the dim light of the hallway. "Claire must stay," Mathilda continued. "She is the last. Now that Emile and Lucien are gone, it is her duty to continue the pact." "Enough with this nonsense about a pact," Theodora burst out. "Your husband died of a heart attack and your son was lost in the storm. There's nothing supernatural about any of this." Mathilda looked at him with a strange mixture of pity and contempt. "You're an educated man, Theodora, a notary, a man of law. You believe in reason, in things you can measure and explain. But there are forces in this world that reason cannot touch. Things older than your religion, stronger than your laws." She stepped closer to her daughter and laid a hand on Claire's cheek. "Claire knows. She's always known. Since childhood she's had the gift. She can hear what others cannot, see what others refuse to see." That day, Theodora decided to act. He went to the village to speak with Abbé Fournier. The priest received him in the sacristy of the church. And Theodora immediately noticed how much he'd changed. The man looked as though he had aged 10 years in a few short weeks. His eyes were hollow, and his hands trembled faintly. "I know why you've come," said the abbé before Theodora could speak. "It's about Clea. She's getting worse, hearing voices, speaking of the forest and of—" "I know," interrupted Theodora. "I saw Lucien that day," said the abbé quietly. "I saw what happened in the clearing." Theodora froze. You followed him." The abbé nodded and told him everything, the journey into the forest, the stone circle, the ritual, Lucien's disappearance. When he finished, Theodora was pale as death. "I wanted to act," continued the abbé, his voice trembling. "I wanted to cleanse that house, to drive out whatever evil remains there. But when I arrived, when I began the prayers, I saw something. Something I should never have seen. Something that does not belong to this world." "What did you see?" asked Theodora, though every part of him dreaded the answer. Abbé Fournier closed his eyes, and a tear rolled down his cheek. "I saw what the Durand family has worshipped for generations," he whispered, voice breaking. "And I finally understood why your father-in-law had that look of terror when he died. He tried to break the pact, but you don't break a pact with that. You only offer yourself up as sacrifice." That night, Theodora returned to the Durand estate with one clear purpose: to take Clea away, by force if necessary. But when he arrived, chaos reigned. Madame Blanchard was rushing through the halls, her voice trembling with panic. "She's gone," cried the old woman as soon as she saw him. "I was in the kitchen, and when I went upstairs, she wasn't in her room." Theodora sprinted up the staircase. Clea's room was empty, the window wide open, curtains whipping in the icy wind. He leaned out. The drop was far too high to jump without dying. Then he saw them, footprints in the snow leading away from the main door, bare feet. "My God, she went outside," he gasped. He raced down the stairs and out into the storm, following the tracks that led toward the eastern forest. the same path Lucian had taken. He ran as fast as his legs would carry him, calling her name into the freezing air, his breath forming white clouds that vanished in the mist. An hour later, he found her standing motionless at the edge of the deep woods. She was barefoot, her nightgown soaked and clinging to her skin. Her feet were cut and bleeding, yet she seemed to feel nothing. She stared into the forest as though something unseen was calling to her. "Clea," he shouted, rushing to her. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders. "What are you doing? You'll freeze to death." She turned slowly toward him, and what he saw in her eyes froze him more than the winter wind ever could. It was Clea. Something else was looking through her eyes, something ancient and hungry. "They called me," she said, in a voice that was quite her own, deeper, resonant, almost echoing. "The time has come. The bloodline must continue. The child must be born here in the forest where the pact was sealed." "No," Theodora said, grabbing her arms. "You're coming with me now." He tried to pull her back toward the house, but she resisted, with a strength no human should possess. Then suddenly, she screamed, a sound so raw and piercing it shattered the stillness of the woods, and collapsed in his arms. When she lifted her head again, her eyes were clear once more, filled with terror and confusion. "Theodora, what's happening? Why am I outside?" He held her tightly, unable to answer. Carrying her in his arms, he hurried back to the house, where Madame Blanchard immediately put Claire to bed and sent for the doctor. Dr. Roussel, the physician, arrived an hour later and examined Claire carefully. "She's in shock," he said gravely, "and in her condition with the pregnancy, it's very dangerous. She needs absolute rest. Frankly, Mr. Marchand, I strongly recommend you leave this house. The atmosphere here is not healthy for her." That night Theodora stayed awake until Claire fell asleep. Around 3 in the morning she began to speak in her sleep. "The stone circle, they wait for the blood of the line. The child must be offered." Theodora felt his blood run cold. He suddenly understood the horrible truth. The pact did not demand merely a symbolic tribute. It demanded blood, the blood of the Durand family. And Claire, carrying the child of the line, was next on the list. The next morning he confronted Mathilda in the great salon. "You knew," he accused her. "You knew what this pact really demanded. It doesn't bring prosperity, it brings death. Emile is dead. Lucian has disappeared. And now Claire." Mathilda looked at him calmly, without a flicker of emotion. "The pact has given us everything we have. Our fortune, our standing, our power. Each generation paid its tribute and each generation prospered. It is the order of things." "The order of things," Theodora repeated in disbelief. "You speak of human sacrifice, of murder, of continuity." Corrected Mathilda, "The line must continue. That is why Claire must carry the child to term. That is why she must offer it to the stone circle." "Never," Theodora roared. "I will not allow it." "You do not have a choice," said a voice behind him. He turned and saw Claire standing in the doorway. But once again it was not truly Claire. Her eyes had that strange light, and she stood with a posture that was not her own. "The pact must be honored," she said in that deep, resonant voice. "The child belongs to the forest. It always belonged to the forest." Theodora backed away, terrified. He then understood that his wife was no longer his wife. She had become an instrument of the pact, possessed by something ancient and merciless. "I must go for help," he stammered, retreating toward the door. "No one can help us," said Claire, who was not Claire. "The circle is complete, the blood will be spilled, and a new generation of Durands will be born in darkness." Theodora fled the house, running, pursued by that strange laughter of his wife, a laughter that echoed like several voices at once. He ran all the way to the village and burst into Father Fournier's rectory. The priest, seeing his state of panic, ushered him inside and listened as Theodora recounted everything that had happened. "She must be exorcised," Theodora pleaded desperately. "We have to drive out whatever is inside her." The abbé shook his head sadly. "I have already tried, Theodora, and I failed. What possesses your wife is not a demon in the Christian sense of the word. It is something older, something that existed before Christ, before Rome, even before the Druids. Catholic prayers have no power over it." "Then what can I do?" Theodora asked, trembling. The priest thought for a long moment, then walked toward an old armoire at the back of the sacristy. From it, he drew a cracked leather-bound book. "This belonged to my predecessor, Abbé Mercier. He was fascinated by the ancient religions of the Cévennes, by the pre-Christian cults that survived in these mountains. He documented rituals, protections. There may be something in here that could help you." They spent the rest of the day studying the book. Finally, they found something, a ritual of protection, a way to break an ancient pact. But the price was terrible. The one who broke the pact had to take the place of the sacrificed. Someone had to die so that the others could be freed. Theodora looked at the abbé, and both men understood what that meant. "I'll do it," Theodora said firmly. "Claire is my wife. Our child is innocent if my death can save them." "There may be another way," the priest interrupted. "If we could destroy the place where the pact was sealed, the stone circle, perhaps we could break the bond without sacrifice." It was a faint hope, but it was all they had. That night, armed with pickaxes, sledgehammers, and lanterns, Theodora, Abbé Fournier, and 3 brave men from the village set out toward the eastern forest. The full moon illuminated their path with a silver, uneasy glow. They reached the clearing around midnight. The stone circle stood before them, ancient, towering, and menacing. A thin mist drifted across the ground, and the air crackled with an electric charge that made the hair on their necks stand upright. "Let's begin," said the abbé, raising his hammer. But before he could strike, a voice echoed through the clearing. Not a voice heard by their ears, but something that spoke directly inside their minds. "You dare profane this sacred place." And then they saw them, figures. Silhouettes emerged from the mist, dozens of pale, spectral figures. And in the center stood Claire, dressed in a long white gown, her rounded belly visible beneath the thin fabric. "Claire," shouted Theodora, "my God!" But she didn't respond. She walked slowly toward the heart of the stone circle, as if entranced, guided by the ghostly apparitions. Theodora tried to run to her, but an invisible force slammed him backward, throwing him violently to the ground. The 3 villagers, paralyzed with fear at the sight, dropped their tools and fled screaming into the forest. Only Theodora and Abbé Fournier remained, helpless witnesses to what was about to unfold. Claire now stood at the exact center of the ancient circle. Her arms rose toward the night sky, her hair whipping in the cold wind as the spectral figures surrounded her, forming a second, outer ring. Theodora, still pinned to the ground by that unseen power, could now see the apparitions more clearly in the moonlight. They were people, or rather, what had once been people. Their faces were hollow and pale, their eyes empty sockets, their mouths frozen in silent screams. And then Theodora recognized them. Emile Durand, his expression still twisted in the terror of his last breath. Lucian, his eyes glassy and haunted. And others, older, dressed in garments from centuries past. All Durands, all the ones who had paid the tribute, all bound to the curse for eternity. These are them, whispered Abbé Fournier beside him, his voice trembling with both horror and understanding. Every Durand who ever paid the price. They didn't die, they became the pact, trapped forever. Claire began to chant in that same ancient, guttural language Theodora had heard once before, but now her voice was not her own. It was deeper, layered, as if many voices spoke through her at once. The earth beneath the stone circle began to glow with a faint greenish light. Strange runes flared to life on the standing stones, the very same markings Theodora had seen in the hidden cellar chamber. "We have to stop this," Theodora cried, struggling to rise, but the unseen force pinned him harder to the ground. Abbé Fournier drew his crucifix and began reciting prayers in Latin. But unlike any exorcism before, his words had no effect. The spirits did not retreat. The light did not fade. In fact, the glow around Claire grew stronger. In nomen Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, the abbé chanted louder, sweat running down his forehead despite the freezing night. And then the air changed. A low rumble echoed from beneath the ground, as if something vast and ancient was waking beneath the stones. Freezing cold filled the air. Suddenly, one of the apparitions broke away from the circle, Emile Durand's ghost. He drifted slowly toward Abbé Fournier, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like an echo from deep within the earth, distant, distorted, and mournful. "Your prayers are useless, priest. Your God has no power here. This place is older than he is, by millennia. Here the ancients reign, those who existed before men, and who shall remain long after." The abbé stepped back, clutching his trembling crucifix. Who are you?" he asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. "We are the guardians of the pact," replied Emile's apparition. "We are those who accepted the bargain, prosperity in exchange for blood, power in exchange for the soul. I tried to break the pact, and look at what I have become. Neither dead nor alive, a prisoner of the void, bound to serve for eternity." "Father," cried another voice suddenly. Theodora turned, and his heart froze. Lucian, or what was left of him, was approaching too. His son's face was pale as wax, his eyes hollow, lifeless. "Lucian, my God," whispered Theodora in horror. "I want to honor the pact," said Lucian's ghost, his tone heavy with regret, "as the duty of the eldest required, but the pact had changed. It demanded more. It wanted everything, my body, my soul, even my existence itself. And now I am bound to this place, to this ritual forever." At the center of the circle, Claire screamed. Her body arched violently, and a blinding light burst from her womb. "Claire!" shouted Theodora, struggling against the invisible force that held him to the ground. "The time has come," intoned Emile's ghost. "The child will be born, and with its birth, the pact will be renewed for another generation." "No," roared Theodora, "I won't let you take my child." With a desperate, superhuman effort fueled by love and terror, he broke free from the unseen power. He lunged toward Claire, charging through the circle of phantoms. The spirits tried to stop him. Their icy hands grabbed at his arms and shoulders, their touch burning like frost, but he kept pushing forward. Every step felt like agony, like wading through death itself. "Claire!" he cried, finally reaching her. He caught her in his arms and instantly felt the unnatural cold radiating from her body, a chill not of this world, as though it came from deep within her soul. Claire's eyes flew open. For a fleeting second, Theodora saw his real wife, the woman he had married, the woman he loved. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Theodora, help me. I don't want to. I don't want our child to." But before she could finish, her body convulsed violently. The chorus of ghostly voices rose to a deafening crescendo, and the greenish light from the ground exploded into a blinding flash. Abbé Fournier, realizing what was about to happen, cried out, and remembered that Christian prayers were useless. He recalled the ancient book he had studied. There was another ritual, older, more dangerous, a rite that did not call on God, but used the forces of nature itself to break evil bonds. The priest took from his pocket a small pouch of herbs he had prepared according to the book's instructions: water collected at midnight, sea salt, and ashes of rowan wood. He drew a circle around himself with the herbs, then began to intone words in a language he did not fully understand, the same ancient tongue Claire had chanted, but used now with a different intent. The apparitions reacted immediately. They all turned toward the abbé, their faces contorted with rage. "You dare use our words against us," the collective voice growled. But the priest continued, his voice growing stronger, more assured. The circle he had traced began to glow with a golden light, a light that clashed with the sickly green glow of the stone circle. At the center, Theodora still held Claire in his arms. She was panting, racked by the pains of labor, but now a visible struggle fought within her, a battle between her own will and the force trying to control her. "Theodora," she said in a moment of lucidity, clutching her husband's shirt, "if the child is born here in this circle, he will be bound to the pact. You must take me far from here. I can't carry him in my condition. The baby is coming now. So you must break the link," she said, glancing toward the center of the circle. Theodora followed her look and for the first time saw exactly what lay at the very center. A flat stone, barely visible in the light, etched with complex symbols. Embedded in that stone, sunk into the rock itself, was an ancient metallic object, a sort of dagger or black, polished poignard, as if forged in flames that did not belong to this world. "It's the anchor," Claire explained, trying to stay conscious. "It's the object Jacques Durand used in 1643 to seal the pact. If you can remove it, if you can destroy it." "But how?" a voice said near them. Theodora jumped and saw Lucian's apparition, but this time his gaze seemed clearer, almost human. "Claire is right," Lucian continued. "I can still resist for a few moments. I am not completely lost. Listen to me. The dagger must be purified by fire, but not just any fire. The fire of the sacred wood. Rowan, the Rowan," Lucian repeated. Theodora, confused and terrified, looked around in disbelief. The Abbé Fournier, still holding his protective ritual, heard the mention of Rowan wood and immediately understood. In Celtic mythology, the Rowan tree was a sacred symbol of protection against evil magic, and there was a Rowan grove just east of the clearing. "Theodora," shouted the Abbé, "I'll hold the barrier as long as I can. Go fetch the Rowan wood and come back quickly." Theodora looked down at Claire, torn apart by the thought of leaving her in such agony. "Go," she whispered, gripping his hand one last time. "It's our only chance for the child." With one final, heart-wrenching look, Theodora stood, turned, and sprinted into the night. The apparition screamed and tried to follow, but the Abbé's glowing circle held them back. A trembling, golden shield pulsing under his fatting strength. Theodora ran faster than he ever had before, his lungs burning in the freezing air. He reached the rowan trees, raised his axe, and hacked through several thick branches. The sound of the blows echoed through the forest like the tolling of a funeral bell. Then, clutching the branches, he raced back toward the clearing. When he returned, the scene had changed completely. Claire lay on the ground, writhing in the throes of childbirth, her screams echoing through the forest. The Abbé Fournier, drenched in sweat and blood streaming from his nose, trembled as he struggled to keep the ritual intact. The apparitions were changing, their outlines growing sharper, their presence heavier, becoming more solid, more real. "Hurry," the abbé shouted hoarsely. "I can't hold them much longer." Theodora threw himself toward the center of the clearing. He laid the rowan branches around the stone altar and ignited them with the lantern flame. The wood caught instantly, erupting into tall, blazing tongues of fire that turned the night sky crimson. A deafening shriek erupted from all around, the collective howl of dozens of tormented souls. "No," roared Emile's voice from within the storm of wailing shadows. "You cannot do this, the pact is eternal." But Theodora did not stop. With a cry of anguish, he seized the black dagger from the stone. The instant his fingers touched the metal, blinding pain tore through his arm, like 1,000 burning needles piercing his flesh. Yet he held firm, shouting through the pain, and drove the dagger straight into the heart of the rowan fire. The effect was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The dagger began to melt, oozing like liquid shadow. The stone circle itself cracked apart, glowing veins of molten red spreading through it. The apparitions screamed louder and louder, their shapes dissolving into light and smoke. The pact is broken," murmured Lucian's fatting voice. And for the first time, peace, a true, gentle peace, crossed his face. One by one, the ghosts faded into the moonlight, their screams softening to whispers, then silence. Theodora collapsed to his knees, gasping, the dagger gone, the fire dying, the clearing now eerily still. Theodora rushed to Claire. She was conscious, exhausted, but her eyes, those eyes that had moments ago glowed with something inhuman, were now her own again. Soft, human. Is it over?" she whispered weakly. "It's over," confirmed Abbé Fournier, collapsing to his knees, utterly drained. But it wasn't quite over. Claire suddenly cried out one last time, and in the dying glow of the fire, their child came into the world. A girl. The newborn let out a strong, clear cry that echoed through the silent clearing, a cry of life breaking through centuries of darkness. Theodora took the baby in his trembling arms, tears of relief streaming down his face. Claire smiled faintly, her face pale but peaceful. "She's free," she whispered. "Our daughter is free, the bloodline is broken." They stayed there until dawn, surrounded by the ruins of the shattered stone circle. When the first rays of sunlight pierced through the trees, they revealed a picture of quiet grace, a reunited family, a newborn child, and the smoldering ashes of an ancient curse finally destroyed. But deep in the forest, something watched. Something old. Something patient. Something that knew that even broken pacts leave traces. And unpaid debts always find their way back, generation after generation. 3 months had passed since that dreadful night in the clearing. Theodora, Claire, and their baby, whom they named Marguerite, had left the Cévennes as soon as Claire was well enough to travel. They settled in Montpellier, in a modest house near the city center, far from the mountains, the forest, and every reminder of the terror they had survived. Mathilde Durand remained in the ancestral home. When Theodora and Claire came to bid her farewell, she had looked at them with a mixture of pity and quiet resignation. "You think you've won," she said in a flat, almost lifeless voice. "You think you've broken the pact, but you don't understand. These kinds of bonds, they're never truly broken. They only change form." Claire said nothing. She simply held her daughter close and walked away, determined never to set foot again in that cursed house. The first few weeks in Montpellier were calm, almost blissful. Theodora returned to his work as a notary, and Claire devoted herself entirely to caring for Marguerite. The child was healthy, perfect, even with her mother's green eyes and her father's black hair. She laughed often, cooed sweetly, and seemed every bit the picture of innocence. But soon Claire began to notice things. Sometimes in the middle of the night she woke up and found Marguerite sitting awake in her cradle, staring fixedly into a dark corner of the room, her tiny eyes unblinking, as if she saw something no one else could see. "It's nothing," Claire told herself. "All Bobbies do that, it's perfectly normal." But deep inside she knew it was. Every now and then she still felt it, that faint, distant presence, like something unseen was quietly watching them, waiting. One cold morning in March, Claire received a letter. The envelope was black, sealed with red wax. Her hands trembled as she broke it open. "Dear Claire, I write this letter knowing it will likely be the last you'll ever receive from me. I am dying. The doctor calls it a disease of the blood, incurable. But I know what it truly is, the price to be paid for breaking the pact. You must understand something, my child. The pact our family made centuries ago was not merely a mystical or commercial agreement. It was a bond of blood, woven into the very essence of our lineage. By breaking it, you did not just free your daughter, you awakened a debt that someone must now pay. That someone is me. My blood drains away little by little, my strength leaves me, but I accept it, because I have seen what the pact has done to your daughter. Yes, Claire, your daughter. You believe she is free, but look closely, truly look at her. She bears the mark. Come see me before I die. There are things you must know about Marguerite, about what she truly is. Your mother who loves you. Mathilde." The letter slipped from Claire's trembling hands. The mark. What did her mother mean by that? She rushed to the cradle, her heart pounding. Marguerite was sleeping peacefully. Claire gently lifted her and examined her tiny body, searching anxiously, and then she saw it. On the baby's right shoulder blade, barely visible in the morning light, was a birthmark. Small but eerily shaped. Complex, almost deliberate. And as Claire's mind raced, a chill ran down her spine. She recognized it. It was one of the symbols she had seen carved into the stones of the cursed circle. The seal of the pact. "No, no, no, no," she whispered, clutching Marguerite close. The baby stirred, opened her eyes, and for a fleeting instant they were not green. They were black. Deep, endless black, like the void itself staring back. Then Marguerite cooed softly, innocent again. Her eyes returned to normal, a clear, bright green. But Claire could no longer deny it. The curse had not died that night in the forest. It had merely changed form. "The spiritual bond, the bond of blood," Mathilde whispered, "that can never be destroyed so easily." Claire leaned closer, her heart pounding. "What are you saying, Mother? That Marguerite, that our child is still tied to them?" Mathilde's eyes glimmered with a feverish light. "You don't understand, my dear. The pact was never about the land or wealth or even power. It was about continuity, a covenant sealed not just in ink or blood, but in heritage. Every child born of the Durand line carries a fragment of it. When you destroyed the dagger, you severed the vessel, but the essence of the pact, it flowed into the nearest life that shared our blood. Claire froze. Her voice trembled. Into Marguerite. Mathilde nodded slowly. Yes, the pact needed a host, a new beginning. It found her innocent, unguarded. The old powers always claim the youngest soul, but there's still hope. Hope? Claire asked, her voice breaking. What hope could there be after everything? Mathilde struggled to sit up, coughing violently. Madame Blanchard rushed forward, but Mathilde raised a shaking hand to stop her. Listen carefully, she gasped. In the forest, beneath the ruins of the old circle, there's something the fire did not destroy, a hidden chamber. It was built by Jacques Durand himself when he sealed the first pact in 1643. Inside lies the true name of the one they served. Destroy that name, and you destroy the pact forever. Claire's mind reeled. The true name, you mean a being? Her mother's lips trembled. Not a being, a presence, something older than faith itself. We called it Le Dormeur des Racines, the sleeper beneath the roots. The Durands drew power from it, fed it through sacrifice. As long as its name remains, its influence lives. Mathilde's breathing grew shallow. You must go there, Claire. Take holy water, salt, and light. Burn the name and bury the ashes at dawn. Promise me. I promise, Claire whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mathilde smiled faintly, a ghost of peace flickering across her dying face. Then perhaps our bloodline will finally rest. Her last breath escaped like a sigh, soft and trembling. The candle beside her flickered once and went out. Claire sat frozen in silence. The old house groaned softly, the wind whispering against the shutters like distant voices. Then, somewhere deep below the floorboards, she heard it. A faint sound. A low pulse. Like something breathing in the earth. The same rhythm she had once felt beneath the stones of the cursed circle. And for the first time since that terrible night in the forest, Claire realized the pact was not broken. It was waiting. That bond can never truly be broken. It adapts, it survives, and it passes on. What do you mean? Claire asked. Mathilde's trembling hand reached toward the nightstand. She took a small wooden box, opened it, and pulled out an aged, yellowed parchment. This is the original contract, she said faintly. The pact that Jacques Durand signed in 1643. Read it. Claire hesitated but finally unfolded the fragile document. The writing was in Old French, nearly impossible to decipher, but she managed to make out the main lines, and what she read froze her blood. The pact was not simply an agreement for prosperity in exchange for periodic sacrifices. It was something far more insidious. The text spoke of a fusion of bloodlines, an inheritance shared between worlds, a seed that would never die. I don't understand, Claire whispered, her voice shaking. Jacques Durand didn't just make a deal with an ancient entity, Mathilde explained. He merged his blood with it. He created a new lineage, half human, half something else. Every generation of the Durand family since then has carried that essence within them. It gave us our power, our wealth, but it is also our curse. And Marguerite? Claire asked, horrified. Marguerite is the firstborn after the pact was broken, said Mathilde, her eyes gleaming feverishly. She is unlike any other Durand child. The pact once contained and controlled the essence, but now that it's shattered, that essence is free. It will reveal itself in ways we cannot predict. Claire jumped to her feet, the parchment slipping from her trembling hands. No, my daughter is normal, she's healthy. I won't let this curse destroy her. You cannot stop it, Mathilda said sadly, her voice breaking. But you can prepare her. You can teach her to live with what she is, to control the power before it controls her. How? Claire demanded. Mathilda closed her eyes, drained from the effort of speaking. There is a way, a binding ritual, not to restore the pact, that's impossible now, but to create a new bond, one that you choose, a bond that will allow Marguerite to master her inheritance instead of becoming its victim. Where can I find this ritual? In the cellar, Mathilda whispered weakly. In the secret room. There's another book hidden behind the stone in the north wall. Take it, study it. And when Marguerite turns 7, the age of reason, you must perform the ritual. 7, Claire repeated softly. That's so far away. It will come sooner than you think, murmured Mathilda. Believe me. Until then, watch your daughter. Write down everything unusual you see. The manifestations will begin soon. That night, Claire descended into the cold darkness of the cellar. Just as her mother had said, she found the hidden chamber. Behind a loose stone in the north wall, she uncovered a thick, dust-covered book bound in black leather. It was old, ancient, and the air around it seemed to vibrate faintly, as if the book itself were breathing. Bound in black leather, covered with strange, unfamiliar symbols, she flipped through its brittle pages quickly. And what she read sent a chill through her veins. The rituals described within weren't good or evil. They were simply tools, methods to channel and control forces far beyond human understanding. She closed the book and tucked it carefully into her travel bag, determined never to let it fall into the wrong hands. The next morning, Mathilde Durand died quietly in her sleep. Claire arranged a small funeral, a simple ceremony attended only by Abbé Fournier, Madame Blanchard, and a handful of curious villagers. After the burial, Claire met the abbé in the empty church. "You seem troubled, my child," said the priest gently. Claire hesitated, then decided to tell him everything. The mark on Marguerite's skin, her mother's final revelations, and the ancient book now hidden in her bag. Abbé Fournier listened in silence, his expression growing darker with each word. "I feared this might happen," he said finally, lowering his gaze. "That night when we broke the pact, I felt something, a resistance, as if the pact itself were fighting to survive. We thought we had destroyed it, but in truth, we merely changed the rules of the game." "What should I do?" Claire asked, her voice cracking. "I can't let my daughter become a thing." "She won't become a thing," the priest assured her firmly. "She will remain human so long as she's raised in love and light, but you must stay vigilant. And when the time comes, you must tell her the truth. Secrets are what destroyed your family, Claire. Don't repeat their mistakes." That same day, Claire boarded the train back to Montpellier, the cursed book hidden deep within her bag. Her heart was heavy with dread. The years passed. Marguerite grew into a bright, lively little girl, curious, intelligent, full of laughter. But just as Mathilde had warned, the manifestations began. At age 3, Marguerite started speaking to an invisible friend she called the old man from the forest. She would laugh and chat animatedly with this unseen presence, as if it were completely real. "Who is this friend of yours, my darling?" Claire asked one evening, forcing a calm smile despite her unease. "It's the old man," Marguerite answered sweetly. "He comes to see me at night. He tells me stories about the old times when humans and the others used to live together." By age 4, the signs had grown impossible to ignore. The flowers in the garden would wither at her touch. But strangely, when she placed her small hands on dead plants, they would begin to bloom again. Sometimes seemed to come back to life in her presence. It was as if she could give and take life at will, without meaning to, without even realizing it. By the time she turned 5, Marguerite began to see things no one else could see. She called them the shadows, dark shapes that moved silently in the corners of rooms, always just beyond the light. Sometimes she said they spoke to her. Sometimes they asked her to come play with them in the dark place. Theodora had noticed his daughter's odd behavior for some time, but he had done his best to dismiss it as imagination. Now he could no longer deny what was happening. One evening, after Marguerite had gone to bed, he turned to Claire, his expression grim. "There's something wrong with our daughter," he said bluntly. "Something beyond childish quirks. I'm not blind, Claire. I see how animals react around her, the dogs whimper, the cats run away. I see how other children fear her, even though she's never hurt anyone. And I see how you look at her with that constant fear in your eyes." Claire's heart sank. She had known this confrontation would come one day. Quietly, she went to the cabinet, retrieved the ancient black-bound book, and set it on the table before him. "It's time you knew the truth," she said softly. Then she told him everything. Mathilda's dying confession, the true nature of the pact, and the dark inheritance running through Marguerite's blood. Theodora listened in stunned silence, his face shifting from disbelief to horror, and finally to grim determination. "Then we'll do the ritual," he said firmly. "We'll help her control this power, and we'll protect her no matter what it takes." In the months leading up to Marguerite's 7th birthday, Claire studied the ancient text obsessively. The binding ritual was incredibly complex, requiring rare ingredients and exact timing. It had to be performed precisely at midnight, under the new moon closest to the child's 7th birthday. But as that fateful night approached, the manifestations grew worse. Marguerite began having terrifying nightmares, waking up screaming about the dead who walk in doors that open by themselves. Objects in the house started moving without reason, furniture shifting, candles extinguishing on their own. Once Claire entered Marguerite's room and froze in horror. Her daughter was floating several inches above her bed, sound asleep. "The power is awakening," Claire whispered that night, clinging to Theodora. "We must do the ritual soon, or she'll lose control completely." The day finally came. January 18th, 1905. Exactly 7 years after the death of Emile Durand. Claire, an ancient, seemed to fill the cellar. The air grew so cold that Claire could see her breath misting in front of her lips. The shadows along the walls thickened, twisting unnaturally, and for a heartbeat, it felt as though the very stones were breathing. Marguerite Levalentement la Terre, her eyes no longer green, but two endless obsidian voids reflecting nothing. A deep guttural voice, not hers, echoed from her mouth. "She is mine." Claire's scream tore through the darkness. "No, she chooses her own path." The candles flickered violently. The circle of salt began to swirl, as if an unseen wind tried to erase it. Theodora threw himself to his knees, chanting the words from the book, his voice trembling but unbroken. Claire clutched Marguerite's face, tears streaming down. "Stay with us, my love, choose the light." For a moment, just one, Marguerite's eyes softened. Her small hand reached up, touching her mother's cheek. "I don't want to go there, Mammon," she whispered. Then she screamed. A blast of wind shattered every candle at once. The cellar plunged into blackness, and in that pitch darkness, they heard two voices battling inside the child. One ancient, cold, commanding, and one terrified, human, and heartbreakingly small. Then silence. When the light returned, Marguerite was lying motionless inside the circle. Her skin was pale as snow, her chest still. Claire fell to her knees, sobbing, pressing her daughter's tiny body to her heart. And then a faint breath. Marguerite opened her eyes, green again, bright and human. "It's over," she murmured weakly. "He's gone." Theodora and Claire held each other, shaking with relief. But behind them, the shadows on the wall moved one last time. Forming for a second, the outline of a tall, stooped figure watching them, before vanishing into the stone. They buried the remnants of the ritual in the woods outside the city, sealing the book inside an iron box, and swearing never to speak of that night again. Marguerite grew up strong and kind, though she always seemed to sense things others couldn't: a chill before a storm, a whisper in an empty room, a flicker in the corner of her eye. Claire often wondered, late at night, whether the ritual had truly freed her daughter, or merely changed the rules once again. Because sometimes, when the moon was new and the house was silent, she could swear she heard a voice, faint, patient, ancient, whispering from somewhere deep in the walls. A choice made once can always be unmade. Ancient and terribly powerful, the presence filled the room. A voice echoed, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You dare bind what is mine." Claire trembled, but her voice didn't waver. "She is not yours," she said, her tone firm and defiant. "She is our daughter, she is human, and she chooses the light." A low, cruel laugh rolled through the darkness. "Foolish mortal, you think you can sever what was woven in blood and soul. She is as much mine as she is yours. She is the bridge between worlds, the half-open door. She is the pact reborn." "No," shouted Theodora, stepping in front of his daughter. "You've taken enough from my family. You won't have her." Silence. Then, unexpectedly, Marguerite spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, and heartbreakingly clear. "He's right, old one." The air trembled. "You've taken much. My great-great-grandfather and all those before him. My grandfather, my uncle, you took and took, but you never gave what you promised. The prosperity you offered was an illusion, just emptiness painted in gold." The presence seemed to recoil slightly, as though taken aback. "You understand?" the voice asked, with something almost like emotion. "Yes," said Marguerite softly. "I understand now. You're not evil, old one, you're just lonely. You've been alone so long you've forgotten what it means to choose. But I remember, and I choose my family. I choose love." For a long time, there was nothing, no sound, no movement. Then slowly the air began to ease, the pressure lifted. The shadows melted away, like morning mist before the sunrise. "Very well, little wise one," the voice murmured at last, faint and almost sad. "You are stronger than all who came before you. The bond is broken. You are free. But remember, the door you carry within you will never close completely. One day, you will have to face what you truly are. And when that day comes, I hope you'll remember that I honored your choice." And with that, the presence was gone. The candles steadied. The cold vanished. The cellar was once again just a cellar, still, silent, ordinary. Marguerite collapsed into her mother's arms, drained but peaceful. Claire held her tightly, tears spilling down her face. "It's over," she whispered. "It's finally over." But Marguerite, half asleep, murmured something only Claire could hear. "No, Mama, it's not over. It's only the beginning." Years passed. Marguerite grew into a remarkable young woman, beautiful, intelligent, and wise beyond her years. The strange manifestations had ceased after the ritual of binding, but she still carried something within her, a quiet strength, a sense of knowing. And sometimes, late at night, she would pause, as if listening to a voice only she could hear. Mountains still wrapped in a veil of mist. "And sometimes," she whispered, "when the wind blows from the woods, I still hear him." Sophie remained silent. The steady ticking of the old clock filled the air, marking the weight of what had just been said. Marguerite rose slowly, her movements graceful yet heavy with an ancient weariness. She took a small, dark wooden box from the mantel and handed it to the historian. "What's inside," she said softly, "is the last thing he ever left me, the seal of the pact, broken but not dead." With trembling hands, Sophie opened the box. Inside lay a tarnished medallion engraved with strange symbols, resting on a piece of worn cloth. A faint scent of ash lingered around it. When the morning light touched the metal, it shimmered faintly, as if alive. Marguerite closed her eyes, listening to something only she could hear. "He's still waiting," she murmured. "Always." When Sophie looked up again, the old woman seemed changed. Her green eyes glowed with that same inhuman depth, that same connection to something beyond this world. "Promise me one thing," Marguerite said. "Don't try to understand more. Knowledge draws what sleeps, and some doors only need a whisper to open again." Sophie nodded, shaken to her core. She left the house in silence, the medallion clutched tightly in her hand, not realizing that by keeping her promise, she had become its new guardian. That very day, lightning struck Marguerite's house. It burned to the ground. No body was ever found. And since then, in the Cévennes, the old folks still say that on certain windy nights, when clouds hide the moon, you can see the figure of a little girl walking among the ruins, a child with green eyes, holding the hand of an old man. They say the pact never truly ended. It sleeps and waits for the next choice. The distant mountains of the Cévennes. "There are things in this world older than humanity itself," Marguerite said softly. "Things that wait patiently, watching, hopping. My ancestor Jacques opened a door in 1643. My parents believed they closed it in 1898. But doors like that, they never truly close. They remain slightly ajar, just enough for something to seep through." "What do you want me to do?" Sophie asked quietly. "Write everything down," Marguerite replied. "But don't publish it. Keep it safe. And if one day someone else bearing the name Durand or carrying our blood comes to you, speaking of strange visions, of voices in the forest, of dreams they cannot explain, give them this manuscript. Give them the story. Because knowledge is the only weapon we have against the darkness." Sophie Laurent nodded, scribbling notes as fast as she could while Marguerite spoke, her hand trembling. When the historian finally left, Marguerite was alone once more in the silence of her old house. She climbed the stairs quietly and entered the bedroom of her grandson, a boy of 7, sleeping peacefully beneath a wool blanket. She approached, brushed a strand of hair from his face, and froze. There, on his right shoulder blade, was the mark. The same mark she bore. The seal of the pact, passed on once again. "I'm so sorry, my little one," she whispered, her voice breaking as she stroked his hair. The inheritance continues, but I promise you, I'll teach you to be stronger than those who came before. I'll teach you to control what's inside you. You won't be a victim, not like them. She turned toward the window, staring out across the dark silhouette of the Cévennes, the mountains rising like sleeping beasts against the horizon. And then, carried on the cold night wind, she heard it, a whisper, ancient, patient, and unbearably familiar. The pact is never truly broken. It waits. It always waits. And one day the debt will be claimed. For blood calls to blood. And darkness never truly sleeps. Marguerite closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. Not to God, but to her ancestors, to all those who had carried the burden before her. Give us strength, she murmured. Give us wisdom, for we are the Durands and our story is not yet over. The window slammed shut with a sharp crack, shutting out the wind and the night beyond. But deep in the forests of the Cévennes, within the broken circle of ancient stones overgrown with moss, something stirred. Something that had been waiting. Something that had all the time in the world. Because blood pacts never truly die. They sleep. And they wait. For the moment to awaken again.